everyone, and welcome to Burn the Ship, the podcast that helps entrepreneurs go all in on their business, and we introduce them to professionals that can help them do so. Today, we have a very special guest, Charlie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for asking. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Please introduce yourself in the name of your business.
Absolutely. I'm Charles Cascio. I'm the founder of Melchizedek Consulting.
Awesome, awesome. We so look forward to learning more about what it is that you do. But before we get into that, we want to learn more about your story. So please take a couple seconds and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm sitting in Greenville, South Carolina. And about a year ago, I moved from New York, from Long Island, New York, with my wife and my 5 kids. So that was a bit of a process trying to figure out what we want out of the next 5 or 10 years of life, but that landed us here. And I think one of the themes of my life is just following where life leads and not trying to press too hard and push too hard against it. So things led us here, and it was an incredible decision for us. We've been really loving it in South Carolina here. So I've had a couple different businesses that I've been involved in over the years, but my heart really lies in operations and especially mission-driven organizations.
Awesome, awesome. So New York City, were you from there? Did you end up there? Tell us a little bit about how you got to New York before you got to South Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Long Island, New York. So I did spend a lot of time in New York City. I worked in New York City for a number of years. But yeah, born and raised in Long Island, and great place. Still have a bunch of family there, but it's been a real breath of fresh air being here.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's not as hustle and bustle. I've been in the South for my entire life, but I have visited New York, Chicago, those larger cities up there, and it's just a lot more going on. You being there in South Carolina, a little bit slower now. It is a decent city there. I've visited many a times working in that particular area, so I can understand how it slows down for you. So you say you have 5 children. They're teenagers. They're younger. Tell us a little bit about that situation.
Yeah, so I have right now 5 that are 10 and under.
Okay.
So at one point I think it was 5 and under when my youngest was born, but they're all about a year and a half apart. So I have Tyler, Ella, Lucas, Ava, and Leah. And a really, really quick side note is the first business that I launched, which I still do operate, is called Teal Painting. So me and my wife, this is probably about 5 years ago or more, we sat down and we were trying to think of names, and we're like, well, we have 5 kids. So what can we do that's related to house painting and that's creative? So I'm writing out all their names with her, and I'm like, Tyler, Ella, Ava, Lucas, Leah. It spelled the color teal with an extra L. So we went with that, we ran with that, and it's just funny because a lot of what I do, just they're the motivation for me. They
Mm-hmm.
are the
Mm-hmm.
number one. Becoming a father was the most impactful moment of my entire life. So I feel like it was really fitting and appropriate for them to be the foundation and the name and the focus and the everything of what I do. So it is the best thing in the world, and they're a lot of fun. They're a blast.
Awesome.
So I got 5, 10 and under.
5, 10, and under, man. You're a champ, man. I don't care how the rest of this interview goes. You're a champ. You're a champ.
Yeah, I win.
You're right. So now you said something interesting, though. You said one of your first businesses and one that you still do now is a painting company. Have you always been a contractor? You've been in that home services space. Tell us a little bit about how you leaned there first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did grow up in my father's construction business.
Mm-hmm.
So my father was an iron worker, but you see all phases of construction. And so we were on a lot of projects that really just taught me how that business functions, how it runs, the issues. But the irony is, in that world, I was always really, really interested in the nuts and bolts of the actual business operation more than the artistry and the craft of that actual trade. But because of how my brain functions, I want to learn it all. So I was actually welding when I was probably 13 or 14 years old. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to dive in on everything, but where my heart was at was really the business. So just seeing the areas that he struggled, well, how could you grow your business at this phase? And even as a young kid, that's the track that my mind was always on. So I saw that. And then going into college, I was a business major. So I took some construction related business classes, some finance classes. So I wanted the full gamut, but I did grow up in the construction industry, which I think in terms of mechanically speaking, painting has sort of the easiest entry point.
Hmm.
But in terms of the operation and the intricacies and the subjective nature of residential painting, it's super complicated. So I like that dynamic between those two things. So yeah, I grew up in it really.
Yeah, yeah. Now that's a very different thing that you shared. That when I talk to a lot of business owners, they focus on working in the business, but your
Yes.
concentration was working on the business. As you have grown the painting business and doing some consulting on that, how is it that you've been helping some of these painters work on the business instead of working in the business with the rolling of the paint?
Yeah, and you made a really great point. So it's really ironic how you learn about yourself through your experiences. So it's kind of like you take a step out there and you're trying to figure out what you need to do. You're in this paralysis phase, which I'm speaking from my personal experience.
Hmm.
Then I got out there and I did it. And I realized over a year or two, I don't love actually painting. I don't mind it. I don't hate it. I've done plenty of projects. If anyone ever hears this that I painted in your house, I never hated it.
Hmm.
But it was never my thing where I was painting and it was just my dream to start a painting business because that's seems to be more natural. I kind of did it backwards in a sense where I'm like, I don't mind it, but I wanted a business that I can work on. And it's funny because I spent most of my time as a business owner consulting myself, always having these meetings in my own mind. How
Uh-huh.
to, I'm changing CRMs and I'm revamping. But I got to this point where I feel like I really got it down to the point where I'm moving from New York and I have crews right now as we speak that are painting in New York. So I had to really optimize and make this business efficient so that I could run without my direct supervision 24/7 as it was before I moved. So that became a passion for me. And I kind of encapsulated my business model, my system, into a course really that is actually for free. And the thing that I have alongside of that course is the implementation of it because that's the consulting side of me saying, I get it. Most painters, most contractors, home service businesses, they'll see the system and they'll be like, wow, that looks really efficient. How do you not answer the phone 24 hours a day while you're painting and working? How do you do that?
Hmm.
So they'll like it. They'll think it makes sense. But then when it comes to sitting down, like they're going to have to pull away from their business, get into some kind of office environment, start doing all the implementation, getting their contact lists digitized, all the stuff that makes us just want to go crazy. So we come alongside and we'll help set them up with a system and a process and we'll do the implementation for them.
Hmm.
So again, going back to finding my way always into something that I enjoy doing, which is not necessarily the thing that you see on the surface, but that's a huge process of learning about yourself really. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Again, like I said, it's so rare. As you can imagine, I've spoken to thousands and thousands of business owners, and I've tried my best to help them to understand the importance of working on the business because just using landscapers as an example, you can't do as much on a zero turn as you can if you're out
yeah.
in there networking, making sure your business solutions are tight and right. And you, like you said, you can't answer the phone as you're cutting grass because then, or on the ladder, as using painting as an example. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that. Now, you were doing that in New York and you brought that down to South Carolina. Now, tell me a little bit about the transition until where you felt comfortable enough with your own processes and efficiency that you wanted to move it on to other people. What kind of sparked that?
Yeah. So there was one major catalyst for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that experience was what really showed me where I'm the most effective. And it was really a mix of two things. So we had a trip planned to go to Puerto Rico, myself, my wife, the five kids, and it kept escalating where we were like, should we go for a week, 2 weeks? We finally settled on going for a month. Okay,
Okay.
so I'm going away, and we're not in the season of life where we're taking a lot of vacations. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of not me really either. Even though I love to travel, I'm always just kind of like work focused.
Mm-hmm.
So we said, we're going to go away for a month. And it really scared me at first. But while we were away was the major kind of eye-opening experience that I had. And I realized as a business owner, there's a little bit of a misconception on both sides. You have this one side where it's like, oh, I'm a small business owner. I don't have time to do anything. I'm up 24. And I was in that life, right? Where I'm taking calls at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And then on the complete other side of that is this other misconception, I believe, where it's like, well, you start a small business and now you're free. You have all the time in the world. And it takes time to get there. So I
Mm-hmm.
think step one for me on this trip was kind of deprogramming my brain to have to think that I don't deserve this vacation. I shouldn't be here. So I got
Mm-hmm.
over that. And then I realized that you have to get to that place where you do put in the work and the time and you're really intentional to be able to do those things effectively. Because again, obviously I didn't want to come home from Puerto Rico with a bunch of fires and a business
Mm-hmm.
and a failed business.
That's right.
I wanted to go away and enjoy, but I also wanted to have the comfort knowing that things were under control while I was there. And some of it's mental, some of it's practical. But that's, I think, at the heart of where my entire focus is right now with consulting,
Mm-hmm.
because there's kind of different groups that I think need it, but I think everyone, all entrepreneurs, and even outside of that group, we are expected to be so many things in this present moment of time. It actually seems impossible. Like we have to be content creators, we have to be organizational leaders, we have to be craftsmen. So if you're home services, I just think that's like that seems impossible to do all that. And this evolving climate, this business climate where just more and more is expected, not even on the trade end of things, because customer expectations are always going to continue to grow because of competition and because of our economy, but also the expectations of how many posts do we need to have on social media. If someone went on my social media page, do they think that my business is even open? And people are stressed about that. It's like, okay, so what do? We hire 500 people to work on our small business, three content creators and a CEO. It's so where my heart is like we don't have to be all of those things. We just have to be really wise with our allocation of resources, be really effective, zero in on what we need to do, and bring in outside help, which is where our company would come in. My organization would come in to help you with that. So that's a little bit longer and more things involved in that explanation. But Puerto Rico, I will forever be grateful to you for that. Was an amazing trip.
Mm-hmm.
Not only was it an amazing trip, I learned a lot about myself on that trip.
So was it the beach or by the pool that gave you that burn the ship moment? Were you under an
Uh,
umbrella? Where were you?
I love that question because it takes me back in my mind's eye right now. So there's a place called Hayuya,
Mm-hmm.
and my apologies if I'm still not saying that correctly. It's central Puerto Rico in the mountains,
Mm-hmm.
the most peaceful, beautiful, calm place that I have personally ever been.
Okay.
Really, really not so much of a tourist attraction, but we had this little place there that we stayed for about 5 or 6 days because we were touring around, and it was there that I had the quiet and I just shut out the noise in my mind and the world. And so it wasn't the beach; it was the mountains, and it was
Okay.
just the sounds of nature and the peace that I felt there, kind of like permeated into me. And I was like, man, I'm in a good place. I feel peace about all these things, and that's that's where the magic happened.
Awesome, awesome. I am one with the earth. So let's go ahead and
Yes,
start sharing this message. So now you got it going where you're going to crack open the opportunity to share some of your knowledge with other business owners. Now tell us all about your consulting business, who you're looking to get in front of, what you're doing, and how we can help you get in front of those gate openers.
absolutely. So as I mentioned before, I think life is a little bit complicated and not so straightforward. And one of the things that like I take high level principles of life and I implement them in my own business and in other people's business because it's super important to not miss that. So the twists and the turns have led me here. And although many different types of businesses need many type of help. Obviously, we could try to be all things to all men, but it's never that effective. So we have to narrow in our focus. And the last really powerful event that happened was around the time I went to Puerto Rico. I was asked to serve as a chairman of a nonprofit film company. Now that came out of nowhere and it brought everything kind of full circle for me. So Melchizedek Consulting, it's really all about helping nonprofits and mission-driven organizations to get their business side right and to make sure that the world hears their story. So I mentioned painting companies, home services, that's all good. We have an avenue for them. This is totally different.
Mm-hmm.
I look at businesses, there's so many of them, and they could be for profit or non for profit. Nonprofit businesses, ministries, churches, they're very clear about one thing. Like they have a mission. It's to do XYZ, and we need to get that out into the world. There are for-profit businesses as well. And one example is we were searching for a school for my son, and it needed to be very specific in certain ways. I came across a school. It's an S corp, right? It's not a nonprofit, but they are so mission driven by their purpose. They do not know how to get their story out into the world. Now, you may hear content and advertising. That's not even really it. It's the holistic vision of this business, knowing what they do and who they want to serve, right? And that's all in the leadership's head, and they get it more than anybody else. But how did I find the school? Is I was lucky enough to have a word of mouth kind of conversation and connection with them. They need huge amount of help getting their mission out into the world. Same thing with the nonprofit that I'm serving as chairman now.
Mm-hmm.
They understand their mission, like they get it. They just have two really huge problems. They are not business operation focused, and they just need help getting their story out into the world. And again, how could these organizations that are, if it's a nonprofit, right? You have a board, there's 4 or 5 people on the board, or you're this learning center that I mentioned before, there's really 2 people there that are in this role of decision making and leadership. They just can't do all of this. Now, on the operation side, where we want to come in is really, really practical things that businesses need. So the first conversation that we normally have is, let's look at where we're at. Let's try to pinpoint your biggest pain point. And from there, things start to unravel and start to unfold. It gets overwhelming, but that's okay because it's not just you in your own head now. You have myself and others around you who are able to come alongside you and come up with an action plan. So take in your operation, what's your biggest problem? It could be we have a really high demand, but we have specialized teachers in the example of this learning center that are just really hard to find and recruit, and we don't have the time to figure out a plan. We just know that we were not accepting any other students, any new students into our organization. So let's look at that first, right? We'll take the hiring, we'll look at the skill set, we'll break everything down into its most basic form. And that's what I like to call clarity ops, because clarity, in my opinion, for small business owners, especially once you're going and you're seeing some traction, your mission is working and you're getting the word out, you come to these seasons and plateaus where you need clarity. And that's the magic of everything. Because you might think your problem is staffing, but it may not be, because once you're kind of digging into that, well, we figured out how to hire this person. What's really the issue here?
Mm-hmm.
The clarity comes in and it says, well, you know what? Our onboarding process for new students, we didn't realize that it was completely broken. So we find that there are a lot of things that are connected. Organizations are a holistic being. They're like an organism itself. So when we focus on clarity and pinpointing those hot button topics, and it could be budget related, it could be nonprofits who are having issues fundraising, we uncover what the actual problems are when we start there, and we say, this is our number one pain point. Okay, why can't we raise funds? Well, the obvious things. We don't have a follow-up campaign. We don't have any idea how to do it. We've never asked anyone. So
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we need that push. Like, okay, we're going to come up with a plan, and we're going to be very clear on what we're asking and who we're asking. Here's what we're going to ask. We have 30 days. We're going to do a fundraising blitz. Once we start that blitz, we realize, hey, our messaging isn't that clear. Our brand consistency isn't that clear. So with these conversations, you're finding, and businesses are finding, that the clarity is key. Not only that, it's just having somebody there. And I won't go too deep into this, but it really, really is important to mention. Melchizedek Consulting, the name of that is super, like, very, very personal to me, because I'm all about like symbolisms and metaphors, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to write poetry.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this figure of Melchizedek, biblical character, biblical figure, he would kind of come out of nowhere and no one really knows who he is. Thousands of years of reading the Bible, people are like, "Who's this guy? We don't know." And it's just super telling that this character though came out of nowhere, knew their story better than them because he was an outside perspective, came alongside them, offered them bread and wine, gave them nourishment, encouraged them, and that person went back onto his mission and maybe slightly adjusted a little bit from his interactions with Melchizedek. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we figured out that Melchizedek is really me because I'm not Melchizedek. But in the spirit of Melchizedek,
Hmm.
that's really the heart of it. And why nonprofits and churches, ministries, mission-driven organizations, it's because I think that they're the ones who need it most because they're filled with passion, excitement, and the energy and the steam to do all of this. They're just missing the tools and they're missing the resources.
Yes, makes a lot of sense. Now, I appreciate you sharing what it is that you do, but I want to paint the picture even more clarity, and
Mhm.
try to get an idea of what that discovery phase looks like, because you are trying to go in and uncover those issues and then find solutions for them. Do you just have a long conversation with them? Do you have a questionnaire that helps you with that? Give us a little bit of clarity on that engagement and what that looks like and some of those steps that you take to uncover some of those things you need to fix.
Yeah, sure. So that's the most vital part of the process, right? Now, when we know from the outset what our goals are in terms of how I can come alongside and help, if it's a longer term engagement or a shorter term, that will help steer that conversation to be a little bit more intense or less intense. But generally speaking, the initial conversation that we need to have is kind of like it's actually my favorite part of this entire process because I get to start from like I see myself as like a drone. And I know we used to say like the helicopter view, now it's the drone view
Hmm.
because it's 2025, but I'm like this drone with a camera on it and I'm starting out really high and all the initial intake and questions that I'm asking a particular client lets me zero in, closer and closer and deeper until I'm able to see two things. What they're telling me that their organization or business is and what they do versus what I see they're on paper that they're telling me that the organization does. And that first step of the process is crucial. So we're asking pretty basic questions. What's your yearly budget? Let's do a very, very quick expense report. As we're going, problems come up, and oh yeah, well, we're spending a lot of money on advertising. We want to cut that down. So we're kind of taking those notes, putting them to the side as things that we'll address later. But what we want to do is who are the key people? What are their roles? Let's map out your organization. Let's clarify your vision and mission, which is usually a really fun, exciting part. Let's just see where we're at right now objectively and where that lines up with where you think you are and where you want to be. And then at the end of that is where we decide, are we looking at the top one or two or three issues that you're facing right now, or do you need someone who can come in as like a micro COO of your organization that's going to stay for 3 months or even longer than that? And then that's where we really get down to what we need to do together, how we're going to partner together. But that initial conversation is kind of like if you were looking at a house on Zillow. That's how I like to kind of make the analogy. And you look at the listing on Zillow, or I guess it's big here in New York, it's big. We're seeing the square footage, when the house was built, what materials were used, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms. Like we're getting the nitty gritty down, the nuts and the bolts, and we're painting a picture of it. And then you look at the photos, right? And the photos are like Photoshop, best quality. The house looks like it was just built last week.
Hmm.
So we're dealing with that whole dynamic, which is super important because what you're hearing, right, is those polished photos, and then what you're putting down, it may or may not line up with that. But at least we have that Zillow listing that we could start as our baseline. So that initial conversation is like super important.
Yes, thank you so much for explaining that, because again, a lot of business owners, they get so stuck in right now. They can't see further than their nose, although they need to be looking a little bit further. And it shows that you help them to discover those things or on the other side of the forest so they can
Yes.
possibly get there. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that and how you're out here helping those businesses as far as on the home services, those for profits, and especially those mission driven nonprofits. Now, I am
Well,
confident that over your journey of having businesses, working with businesses, you have found some best practices and some of those business skills that have helped you to be successful. Do you mind sharing some of those tips with the entrepreneurs that are watching today that they can possibly put inside of their practice?
yes, absolutely. And I'll just kind of run through them, some of them off the cuff, but
Mm-hmm.
this is like my sweet spot. Every week I normally have at the end of the week some kind of review. So I'll start with that. Planning out your week and planning out an end of the week review is incredibly important. And a lot of the stuff that we look at and we say are maybe fundamental or basic are usually the most important. And those are the things that for a long time I glossed over because I'm like, I don't really need to do that. I'm an adult and I don't need to time box my day and do an end of the week review. But I cannot stress how important it is to do that. You really, as a business owner, the best way to be effective, in my opinion, is to sort of, because you're wearing all the hats. So there's going to be a point in time where you have to just acknowledge that. And maybe that won't be the case in a month or two. But right now, you're only able to do sales oriented tasks from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., for example. You're managing at this point, in this time block later on in the day, you have staff meetings, 2 to 3 p.m. But what you're doing is you're kind of compartmentalizing and separating those tasks so that they don't all overlap. Because what winds up happening is when you don't do that, you're never really getting done what you want to do that day because your to-do list, maybe you checked off one or two things, but there was no control over it. So that daily planning, daily organization is huge. And I tie that to a weekly review. So at the end of the week on Friday is where I have, it could be an hour, it could be a half an hour. I look at the week and I'm like, well, what did I want to accomplish this week? Did I do it? And a lot of the times it's no, right? Because we can't always do it. And then we think about why. And then we look at those exact things. And then the following week, we try to improve upon them. But not only do I do that on the Friday reflection time, I also take a second to look at where I want to be. And going off of what you just said, it is really, really hard because what winds up happening as business owners is Fridays like it could be a if it's a bad week, that's like our sad day. We just want to sulk, what a week. I'm exhausted. I'm all beat up and bruised. So you feel discouraged. But that's the time where you have to look past that, realign yourself and say, okay, look, we're getting there. We're taking steps. Here's where we want to be in 5 years or even next year from now. How do we make sure that the next week that's coming is organized and efficient? And a lot of the things I've learned about myself and my business have come from those reflection points because I just don't know. I can't see past like the problems that were of that week. So I clear everything out of my head to actually write down on paper. And I use notebooks. I got notebooks everywhere. What exactly is the vision and the mission for the next 5 years? So that's another one that's important. I mentioned clarity ops before. A very, very easy best practice that I do is every single problem that comes up. And I used to keep a log of this. I would call my issue log and a lot of it was customer service. But I would take each problem, and let's say it was a supervision or a customer service or a sales problem, write it down, categorize it, and then get to the bottom of what that problem is because usually it is unrelated to the thing that you think it is unrelated to. And once you find out what the problem is, you build a simple system around that, which gets into like the systems thinking, which I feel like I've always had the ability to think in systems, but as entrepreneurs, I think it's one of the most important, vital things to think in systems. It's so easy to think in tasks, but thinking in a system really helps frame your mind because most of the things that we do, right, they're tasks or projects, and there is a difference between those two, but they're repetitive. So it's not like we do this task once, we do it probably millions of times. So if there's a system in your mind around that, it'll help you to become clear on that. There's probably a couple of other things that I can think of off the top of my head, but getting to know yourself too, and maybe I just think along these like very high level existential frameworks in my mind. But the biggest pain point that small business owners, and I think this is maybe the most important thing that I'm going to say,
Mm-hmm.
is we just don't know ourselves enough. And a lot of the friction that we face is because we just don't know ourselves. We're too busy. We're too hard on ourselves. We're too stressed out. We do too much. And it really blocks our brains from processing the simple truth of who we are. And perfect example, I've talked about it already once or twice, is when I started my painting business, I was so blind to that fact, and I saw myself as the painter, and I knew subconsciously that's not what I wanted. I wanted to consult myself in my own business in
Mm-hmm.
some odd way, and that's what I love to do.
Right.
But and even working with my father, when I started welding, this is a true story. I started welding because I wanted to learn. I wanted to see and feel what that business was like to take it back to the operations. But the second I started welding, I kind of lost sight of myself. I said, I'm a welder now.
Mm.
So it is super easy. Some personalities just are like that, and that's me. But we need to know ourselves, and we can't attach our identity to some of the tasks that we do as a business owner while we forget that we have a mission. And as the leader of that, of that mission, we have to guide and steer and direct. So don't let your identity get tied to the actual thing that you're doing, because that kind of makes you think that you're, you know, the most important thing in the world and everything hinges on you. It's just a lot of burden. But also get to know yourself more, because you'll be able to pivot and grow and evolve in your business when you learn more about who you are and what really lights you up on fire.
Yeah, definitely appreciate you sharing that. You hit some very big keys. That is time management. Keep what's clear, and then self-reflection. I definitely appreciate you doing those for
Yeah.
us, because a lot of people, again, they're in the business. They can't even see outside of it. It's hard for them to even see this far because they're so far into it and not looking on the business. So thank you so much for sharing
Yeah.
those best practices. And now I want to take a little bit of a turn and move away from the journey, away from the business, but actually talk about Charlie. So let's just say that you're continuing to have magnificent painting going on this side, consulting there, helping these business owners over here gain clarity, and time and money is not an issue. What is it that you would do with your time if you didn't have to worry about any of those things?
It's just life's timing is so funny, because I sat with this question recently over and over just to make sure I'm on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that question is I would make a movie.
Okay.
Now, that sounds kind of weird. I mean, I am the chairman of a film ministry, so you might not think that's that crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where I think it's really interesting, because it's not just making a movie. I would, if I had all the time and money in the world, I would
Mm-hmm.
sit down and I would write, because I do like to write poetry, as I mentioned. I would write the soundtrack to that movie. And this may take decades. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter though at that point. I would write the soundtrack, and I have a group of really, really gifted, and I'm saying extremely gifted musicians that are, they family, and they're doing their thing, and they're not professional musicians. They're like, nobody knows they're musicians, but they're incredible. And they would all sing, and perform the soundtrack. I would direct and produce this movie. I would tweak all the visuals and let my creative side just go wild. And I don't think I would ever be able to turn back from that. So
Yes.
that's what I would do, and it would incorporate everything, because I would be, like managing the budget, so my operations, and then the creative side, I would be doing the shoots, and then the music, and it would just kind of tie together this weird, wild dream of mine. And that's I get to do a little bit of that every day, which I'm kind of in my dream right now in that respect, which is amazing, and feel blessed for that. But yeah, it would be a movie. It would be a movie, and I do love movies, by the way. I'm a huge movie buff. So
I got you. So, of course, I'm going to ask a probing off of that. What's your genre? Are you going to be action? You're going to do a rom com? You're going to do a What are you doing?
oh, I know exactly what I would do,
Okay.
and my wife may or may not watch the movie because we're like on opposite ends. Sometimes she's a deep person and a deep thinker, but I'm just gonna throw two movies out there,
Mm-hmm.
and then that'll give you some context. The Revenant, which I don't know if you've seen,
Mm-hmm.
and There Will Be Blood.
Okay.
Um, Not the uplifting kind of film that we're that we're doing with the ministry at
Mm-hmm.
all, but
Mm-hmm.
what I love more than anything, I mean, the visuals, the cinematography in those two movies, and the storytelling, to me, in my opinion, is there's nothing better than those two movies.
Mm-hmm.
But what they get at is the tension between light and dark, and the tension between a fallen world and redemption, the yin and the yang, and all those different concepts, because it's really reachable to anyone. We're all living in this tension, and they hit it really, really well. And the end of the movie, The Revenant, there is a fight scene, and I don't want to spoil it too much in case anyone never saw it, but it's one of my favorite movies. One of the final lines is something like justice or revenge is in the hands of God, and it just really summed up that movie so well. And I would have waited like another 5 hours of that film to just to hear that line,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the tension of like evil and brokenness and darkness, and then you get like a shimmer of hope, a glimmer of light, and you feel it, and you're like, okay, and it's this dramatic resolve, and that's what I would do. So yeah, I
Oh,
think
I
I
was
haven't thought too much about the actual, but the screenplay yet. But you never know. Maybe I will one day.
Hey, listen, ain't nothing wrong with that. I was like, Charlie, you
Yeah.
want to fight a bear? Is that what you want to do?
Yeah. Well, my son Lucas is 10, and
Uh-huh.
he would volunteer for that
Okay.
part. So,
Okay. I was about to say, man, that bear scene. Wow. But
yeah.
yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing that. I'll always ask this particular segment because yes, we're focused on business, taking care of our responsibilities, but there is purpose and a reason why we do these things. And I truly do appreciate you sharing that. And I'm going to ask you to share your contact information. So if someone has questions about yourself, your journey, those best practices, how they can get some consultant help from you, what's the best way for them to contact you, Charlie?
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I think I want to share my personal information, because not only do I do this, but I love it, and I've been involved in different chamber groups and networking events that it's a hobby. I love getting to know people. So I'll give you my personal information. So my cell phone number is 516-522-4681, and you could reach out anytime there. And you can email me also directly in my personal email. So it's Charlie, that's CHARLIE dot CASCIO. That's Charlie.Cascio at gmail.com. So I'd love to talk.
Awesome. Awesome. Do you have any website you can send them to, especially that course you talked about?
Yes. So the two websites that you should definitely go check out is the first one will be on the mission driven nonprofit ministry consulting, Melchizedek. So that's www.melchizedekcg.com, and I'll spell that one for sure. That's MELCHIZEDEKCG.com. And then the second one for painting contractors specifically is www.poweredbyteall.com, and that's teal with two L's, referencing
The
my
children.
painting business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the children,
And the children, most
and the
importantly.
children. All right, thank you so much for sharing that information. And we understand that it's not always easy to share those things and get those thoughts out, but you've done a magnificent job of illustrating your story. And we want to honor you for being a guest. So if you can, please look into the camera, tell the people something good, and give them the last word.
I'm going to tell everyone what I told another group recently that I had to speak with, and it's around the idea of faith. So I don't know where people are coming from right now in terms of their life, their faith journey, what they believe and what they don't believe, but something powerfully was revealed in a way and it's this, that God will move heaven and earth for you. And I believe that to be true for us all. And what that means is you need to really keep that faith strong no matter where you are, but specifically in your mission and what you're doing. Do not give up, because I've been there and people have been there, I'm sure. I've been very close quite a few times, but I'm thankful that I haven't. So do not give up. Keep that faith strong, and there are good things waiting for you. I believe that 100%.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Charlie. We duly appreciate that.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Awesome. And to everyone that is watching, be kind and thanks.